And just like that, the FiveStack, not with Dean Blundell, but with Ellie
Oh, I'm
Leonard and
Dean
Zev
Blundell. I'm
Shalev.
Dean. This is Dean's new look.
I know. I like Dean would look good in that kind of look. He should wear it more.
Yeah.
Dean is somewhere, flying across the Atlantic right now. He thought
Yeah.
he was going to be here, but he wasn't doing his calculations correctly in terms of the distance and the time. I don't
He's
know
going to be
why.
jet lagged anyway. So,
Yeah, so he'll be back tomorrow after an extraordinary week in Greenland and in Denmark. Their coverage was really, really fascinating. I enjoyed watching it a lot, and they certainly brought a whole lot of attention to the story, which may have faded if they weren't there. Which I'm glad they stuck with.
yeah.
The other big story, of course, as everybody knows, is Epstein. It just is massive, really, not just even
Oh,
big.
big.
The amount of documents that have been dumped
Yeah.
on all of us. And Ellie, you've been doing an incredible job of focusing on this and getting it all,
Yeah.
filtered. It's daunting, 3.5
It
million
is.
documents, if that's really what's in there. But it's a lot.
Yeah. I'm trying to give myself space to understand that I by myself cannot look at every single document because that's what I've done in the past is I have scanned them all and I mean 3.5 million. I don't know how many years that would take.
Yeah,
It's as a single human being, I don't think that's possible. But I'm trying to focus in on some of the more important things that I do best, which is like emails and chronology and putting things together and starting to look at the conversations and now we have such a wider berth of people helping. Now we have
yeah.
this giant co-op of people. So I think everybody is sort of picking it apart at their own rate. So it's doable. It's just so much. It's
It's
so
great
much.
having everyone join in, though, isn't it? It's like it's so
Yeah.
relieving to have a lot of people involved and a
Yeah.
lot of eyes on this stuff. There's so much to be dug through here, and there's so many
Mm,
stories. It just blows my mind away how many stories are in there. We're going to get into that today. We're going to talk about all the new Epstein stuff. We're going to talk about Clinton and about their decision to testify, because that is a real differentiator. Because what by them testifying, it means that Donald Trump really will be forced to testify. He'll resist it, but there's going to be a lot of attention and push for him to testify. Hopefully
yeah.
that happens, plus a lot of other people that need to be in front of there. We have a lot in the show today, plus we'll talk about Elon Musk and the raids in Paris, about child
Mhm.
abuse. We'll talk about the shutdown in just a few minutes, plus the identity of the killers in Minneapolis, and a whole lot more. But let's begin with what is breaking news right now, and this is out of DC. The House just passed
Mhm.
their spending bill for 217 votes to 214 to end the partial government shutdown. I think it's just the procedural vote. I'm not sure if they've actually voted.
I don't think, yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think they haven't done the final vote.
The package funds most of the federal government through September 30th and the Department of Homeland Security through February the 13th. That's a 10-day window only for Republicans and Democrats to negotiate on new accountability measures for ICE agents. I mean, they can't agree on anything. How they will agree on these accountability measures in 10 days, I don't know. But that's the solution. It's often the best solution in DC when they just say delay this
Yeah,
issue. Yeah,
Band-Aid,
yeah,
Band-Aid,
yeah.
Band-Aid, Band-Aid.
Get to it down the road somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
the ICE agents, of course, killed 2 Americans in Minneapolis this month. We'll get into that story later on and explain who the killers are and why there's been such an uproar around the Department of Homeland Security. But Trump got his way again, really. He pushed this through by saying, no changes, you've got to pass this. And the
Mhm.
Republicans, being Republicans, just followed everything he said without any resistance. That is unfortunate that they've ceded again, considering 2 Americans are dead. But hopefully, there's still a little bit of fight in the left in the Democrats for them to be fighting for more use of warrants, use of force rules, and those body cams that are so important.
Yes, and I'm sure that right now there's a little bit of franticness within the Republican Party to do anything that they can to make Trump look better than he looks right now because he's in the thick of it.
Yeah,
I don't really know what his plan is for next steps. The Epstein files are out and what is he in there? How many times is he in there now?
I mean,
Thousands and
there's
thousands and thousands.
38,000 is the one number I heard, but I can't believe it. So I'm going still with the
Yeah.
5,400, but it could be that he's in there
Yeah. Yeah.
38,000 times, and that's not
And I
impossible. And
yeah.
it's terrifying to think that he's involved or that involved, but that's exactly
Mhm.
how many times he might be in there. It's
Right.
not news to you or to me that he's that tied in with Epstein, but it's still news.
Right. And I mean, even if it's 5,000 times, like that's
Yeah,
more than most people.
yeah.
Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Was it Vladimir Putin was in there for 1,000, and which also was surprising yesterday or the day before. Each day there have been more and more stories coming up. But back to the politics of this, I think that he's he needed a win, and I think you're right about the Republicans forcing that win in. But it's still tough to imagine how little uproar there is. You've got two dead Americans shot, in cold blood in Minneapolis for just protesting and using their First Amendment rights. And you've got these ICE agents operating like total goons, and it seems to be okay with the Republicans. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems to be that that's fine. They'll just fall into line on this, even though they have such a shrinking majority.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything they can do right now, they're treading water. And we're just, we have millions of people out here digging for, it used to be we were digging for Easter eggs in these kind of small little lumps of files, and now it's just like raining. I mean, there's so much stuff in here, and with that, now we have to be more careful to identify what's truth and what's not truth, because it seems like pretty much everything is in there. But I don't know how they're going to avoid. I mean, the only way to avoid a consequence right now is just full government corruption. Like
Yeah.
there's no way to do it justifiably.
He's going to try stop elections. He's going to try
Yeah.
do the vote thing that he's threatening. We'll get to that story a little
Yeah.
later on. Let's talk about what's going on with the Epstein and the reckoning, is what some people are
Yeah.
calling it. Bill and Hillary Clinton finalized an agreement yesterday to testify under oath about Jeffrey Epstein this month after months of defying a congressional subpoena. Now they're facing contempt of Congress charges if they don't agree. So some people say that's the only reason they're testifying. But the former president and the Secretary of State said they're doing it for different reasons. They said that they're going to sit for depositions on February the 26th and the 27th. And their primary thing that they're looking forward to is to setting a precedent that applies to everyone. That is code for we're setting a precedent in the hope that we can get Donald Trump to testify as well, or certainly add the pressure to Donald Trump to testify.
Right.
What do you think of this agreement by the Clintons? Some people are critical that they even challenged it in the first place, but here they are
Right.
doing the right thing. It appears in good faith, under oath, and they're going
Hmm.
to tell all within this month.
Well, it's a little bit of bluff calling because Clinton has been the number one character in these files that Trump and the mega base have held up as being in the Epstein files. Oh yeah, but what about Bill Clinton? What about Bill Clinton? And we're still, we still don't fully know his role in these files.
Yeah,
Um, I've seen a lot of Bill Clinton in the files, but nothing has been, illegal. He's been in pictures going to Africa. He's been part of the foundation. He's been in a hot tub. But like nothing has read as illegal so far, but he was definitely in proximity to everything. So I can't imagine that he didn't know what was going on.
no,
But it is a bit of a bluff calling for him to say, fine, then I'm going to testify. But I would have loved to be a fly on the wall for that conversation behind closed doors where they made that decision. And as far as Hillary Clinton goes, I feel for her because I feel like she's been in this situation a lot with Bill Clinton over the years.
yeah.
And I wonder how much she can testify. And I sometimes want her to break away and just say the thing. But I don't know if there is a thing in this case. That's he's kind of a sleaze bag. He's had a bad reputation, but nothing that we know of in the past has been illegal.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there is this
what do we
photo
have?
collection from 2000,
Yeah.
which I put up one of the pictures on my narrative newsletter today. But here's the other one that's caught everyone remembers this video and this photo of Donald Trump really grabbing Bill Clinton's what while taking these photos. To me, that's striking that photos exist,
Hmm.
that they have such familiarity. Now, who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe they're just good friends and they're joking around. There they are with Melania circa 2000 and some other
Hmm.
unknown person. But,
Yeah.
it's unusual to see a photo where you have, this going on. However, it certainly, again, points the finger at Donald Trump, like he really needs to testify. Even if it gets
Right.
Bill Clinton into a lot of trouble about Epstein, or being, whatever with Donald Trump. Who knows? Maybe they did have an affair or whatever. None of that really matters to most people. What matters to most people is, was the crimes done against underage women or underage girls,
Mhm.
and what other financial crimes are going on there. So the fact that this is happening, this photo exists, actually looks bad for Donald Trump, not necessarily for Bill Clinton, because we know Bill Clinton didn't get into that much trouble with
Right.
Epstein, but Donald Trump
No.
is alleged to have.
Well, and Clinton was one of many, many, many people in Epstein's circle who he knew through Ghislaine. Like Ghislaine knew everybody. She was close to everybody. She was close to the royals. She was close to the Clintons. She was close to every famous person that Epstein ever met came through Ghislaine. And so, the idea that Trump and Clinton were hanging out. I mean, Trump has not always been this raving Republican that he is now. He
It's
was a
true.
seeker of fame, and he wanted to be popular, and he wanted to be he was very much like Jeffrey Epstein. He wanted to have a black book full of famous names. And so if Bill Clinton was the big deal at the time, he would have been friends with Bill Clinton. And so it doesn't surprise me to see them hanging out in pictures, but the timing is interesting because if this is the height of the Epstein story and they were all hanging out, then yeah, that is a question that needs to be answered.
Yeah, it is important to figure out exactly what was going on because, of course, a lot of strange things happened. I don't know if you saw the story I posted earlier on today that came out of the Epstein files about the Zorro Ranch, which, had always been, and, shout out to Justice for reminding us that the Zorro Ranch was never really investigated. It was this one of the properties in the Epstein world that was just sort of left, alone. People didn't really dig into it. Now, there's certainly a lot of evidence from different survivors and witnesses who've described a lot of strange things happening at the Zorro Ranch. But the latest finds are quite remarkable. This comes out of the new FBI release as part of the Epstein Transparency Act. And I'll show you a couple
Mm-hmm.
of excerpts here that just make you shake your head. So this is apparently a journalist writing to Edward. I'm not sure who Edward is here, but this is in the FBI files, so potentially an investigator of some sort. Edward, this is sensitive, so it'll be the first and last email depending on your discretion. You can choose to take it or trash it, but this comes from a person that has been there and seen it all as a former staff at the Zorro. The material below was taken from Jeffrey Epstein's home as my insurance in case of future litigation against Epstein. Sorry, no questions. What is damning about Jeffrey Epstein is yet to be written. Did you know somewhere in the hills outside Zorro, two foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G? Both died of strangulation during rough fetish sex. It's stunning. And then even more stunning is that he says he had video evidence of all of this. So he describes this here as the video footage. And it goes on to explain what all of this includes: underage girl sex and threesomes, and even someone talking about attempting suicide in the Bay Area. That's just audio. The stuff that becomes challenging around it is that he also asks for a Bitcoin to be deposited. And
Mm-hmm.
it could be that that's in fact what, he was just looking for payment, for safety, whatever other reasons are. Why I'm leaning towards believing some of this is that the actual manager of Zorro sort of disappeared without a trace after Ghislaine Maxwell's charges were placed against Ghislaine Maxwell. No one knows where he or his wife disappeared to. And they were the key people who understood what was going on in Zorro. And as you know, there are a lot of victims who say that a lot of nefarious things happened at Zorro Ranch.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main ones is Annie Farmer. She was one of the early victims in the mid 90s, and we have her journals now that were dropped just before Christmas. But we also know her story of being taken there under the guise of it being like a college weekend and for college prep, and she thought she was, I believe, I'm trying to think what she thought she was going to go to school for. It wasn't art because that was her sister, but she eventually became a psychologist. But I don't
Yeah.
remember. But it was one of those situations where he was offering to pay for her college, and she was very excited. But she was one of the first girls to go down. I mean, on the record, one of the first girls to go down there and be abused. So
Hmm.
it is, we have probably many, many cases that were not brought up, but that was a big hot spot for a lot of like these global leaders to come stay was the Zorro Ranch because it was his biggest property. And it was near the West Coast. And so if they were traveling to California or doing any of these kind of Silicon Valley things, they would all go stay at Zorro on their way out. And so
Huge
I
property,
find it
right?
hard to believe.
Just
Yeah,
massive
the biggest.
and
Yeah.
remote. No one could really see what was going on there. It
Mhm.
has a strange. It looks like a helipad. I guess it's a helipad. Maybe it's a some sort of ritual thing that Epstein liked to have. I
Yeah.
don't know. But a lot of girls and women spoke about there being sex parties out there, about these
Hmm.
massive showers that multiple people could be fit
Yeah.
into. Real detailed information about what was going on there. So it begs the question for me. Sorry, just a second. Sorry, happens. It begs the question for me. Did the FBI ever actually look at any of this legitimately? And if this thing exists
Yeah.
inside the FBI files, where someone who's claiming to work for Epstein and believe it seems that part seems believable, has any evidence suggesting that two foreign women were killed and during rough sex
Right.
and then buried there, that
There was.
is, takes the whole Epstein thing into a different world. And it reminds me of other documents inside the FBI files, which may have been proven or not. One was around someone claiming about, if any of these girls say anything, that they'd be turned into fertilizer on the back nine,
Hmm.
like all the other, C word. And then another allegation of a strangulation during rough sex from the guy from Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I forget his name right now, but um, I can't remember it. But anyhow, it's alleged in
Right.
those files that there was a complaint that he had killed somebody during rough sex. This was in the
Right.
Trump golf course, not at the Zorro Ranch. So we can't say this is all the same thing, but you
Right.
know,
Well,
we're
and
hearing this a
you
couple
have
of
to.
times now. It's the same story. Maybe girls went missing.
Right.
Maybe some people were strangled during rough sex. The rough sex was definitely very rough. Like it sounds like that from all the accounts that people are talking about or
Well,
that we have now.
these are
This was not,
very.
yeah,
You
go ahead.
remember that like the girls that he brought in were very waifish and were very small and were very thin because that's what he liked. So they were not very strong, big girls.
Yeah.
And you had people like Ehud Barak who went to go stay in the Zorro Ranch all the time. And if you remember from Virginia Giuffre's book, that was his MO, is he liked strangulation and he liked
Mm,
to see them pass out and he liked them to wake up and then see them pass out again. And so the idea of a very small, thin young girl not waking up is not unlikely. Like that's not fantasy to me. Like in my head, that you sometimes you hear stories where you're like, oh, I need to do my homework and make sure that that accusation is true.
mm.
But the likelihood of something like that happening is not that far fetched.
And I've heard it as well with the Leon Black files that we
Hmm.
exposed on the weekend. There were more examples of pretty rough sex. Like, the girls complain about really coming out hurt. That Epstein just
Hmm.
laughed it off a lot of the time. And the other thing that strikes me about this particular allegation is they talk about Jeffrey and Madam G. That sounds like a very
Hmm.
familiar term to be
Madam
using.
G.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't it sound like
Or yeah,
it gives it a
G-Max, Madam
legitimacy?
G,
Yeah.
Jennifer L. Max. Like we're
Mm.
starting to figure out all of her different pseudonyms so that we can decode these emails. She had several names. She used them to buy
That's
several
interesting.
houses. Like, yeah, so she had several, a lot of people thought that like G-Max was her dog, and G-Max is actually her, like one of her names. It's actually her.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's why you're so good at this. You certainly know about the allegations made by Virginia Giuffre as well
Yeah.
that happened there. Anyone else that strikes you, or anything that from her testimony that strikes you as being interesting, related to what happened at Zorro? Anything that you can share about what happened
No,
there?
I'm trying to think. It's hard to figure out like where things took place. I think a lot of her stories happened more in Palm Beach and New York. And I think that's just because that's where we have the most stories from because Zorro was not investigated. But if you look through these emails, part of the last dump that came out in December was a lot of emails from the FBI, both during and before and after they arrested Epstein in 2019, and a lot of it is there's emails saying, let's set our sights elsewhere. Don't worry about Zorro Ranch. Like you hear that a lot in the emails, and it's off-putting, but you also know that Bill Richardson, who was governor of New Mexico at some point, still at that point held power in that state, and so nothing
Talk a little about that a
was
little bit more, because
investigated.
Richardson was a key person in Epstein's circle. I mean, about as key
Hmm.
as George Mitchell, maybe not as big as Ehud Barak and Wexner, but
Yeah.
certainly a key individual that they were both, interested in compromising. So maybe there's some truth in that, but because he was a
Hmm.
Democrat, but also definitely a figure that could have protected them.
Yeah, I mean, he was governor of the state, so I mean, second to the president, he had a lot of power in New Mexico, and even if you're not governor anymore, even if any of this occurred after he was governor, still held power. He still knew the people in charge. He still knew the FBI of his own state. He knew the state police. He knew everybody.
Mhm.
And so he was most definitely one of the people named in Virginia Giuffre's book as being one of the people who was there a lot and did these things a lot. And, you know, like so many people in this story, he's dead now. We cannot interview him because they've waited 30 years to do this investigation. Like the fact that this is everybody's digging into it now is great, but we have to remember everything that we find that is so shocking in these files, the FBI has had for decades and didn't do anything about it.
It really is shocking because these are very serious allegations, and not only for the local police, the state police, but for the
Mhm.
FBI to have ignored these really extensive claims. There's, I don't know the exact number, but there's a lot of complaints here
Mhm.
about all these men doing these terrible things. And, it's interesting that the local state officials are now planning a truth commission around
Mhm.
Zorro that's supposedly starting in April. So, a little late, but we might get some more information. I don't know what that means. I don't know what a truth commission means.
Right.
I know what it means in South Africa. A lot of people came out there and explained what happened and tried to absolve themselves. Maybe it's something we actually need
Mhm.
for the Epstein files because, it's notable that Mandelson has been fired. It's notable that
Mhm.
there's a crown princess, I guess, who's been getting into trouble in Norway. There's a Canadian politician who's expressing remorse, but there's not anyone in America yet saying, "Oh boy, I'm sorry that I'm included in that," except for this one
Right.
guy from CBS News who lost his job, and yes, I'm sure now he's upset about it. But
Right.
we're yet to get to the point where people are saying, "Yeah, we did that, and we feel terrible about that. We did not know we were either being compromised or that something terrible is going on." I mean, people have done that, but not since the
Right.
current release.
My guess is, politically speaking, no other country wants to be doing anything that America is doing right now. So if
Mhm.
America is steeped in the Epstein files, they are going to rid themselves of that so quickly. So if they have anybody in there, because there's other people from Norway that are in those files quite frequently, it's not just always the women that have to go to prison or be or be
Yeah,
have consequences for these things. But I mean, like I think the former prime minister of Norway is one of the guys in the emails, and like there are several people, but my guess is other countries are just they don't want anything to do with this. If
yeah,
they have people, they're happy to say, fine, go to jail, lose your job, whatever, but we do not want any part of these files.
yeah.
America, not so much.
No, I agree with you. I think that there's the attempt to cover this up is actually making America look so terrible in the world's eyes.
Hmm.
We've all been thinking about who else needs to be testifying in this in the upcoming days, and I put up a list earlier on today that you might have an interest in commenting on, or other people might want to suggest. It's interesting that the assistants, the Sarah Keller and Leslie Graf and Nadia
Hmm.
Marcinkova, I don't know if I'm saying, yeah,
Marchinkova. Hmm.
Adriana Ross, these people have got immunity from prosecution, but not from testifying to
Right.
Congress. And it would be interesting to
Right.
get them in front of the Congress. So would Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn. I mean, these people know the whole
They're
business.
supposed to be.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, there's subpoena. They have documents for subpoenas for Khan and Indyke and Leslie Wexner. The four women who are the assistants who were given immunity in Florida, I believe, only have immunity in Florida. I believe it
I
does
think
not
so.
extend outside the state.
But that should give them
And so if
permission to testify in front of Congress.
right. Right. And a lot of them are hard to reach and don't want to testify. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, if they were serious about bringing these people in, they could absolutely do it. I mean, they're all on the East Coast. They haven't disappeared that far, but there's not a lot of intent, I don't think. I think they're dragging their feet.
Yeah. I've also added in here Howard Lutnick because of the exposure this weekend that we found out. Leon Black is an obvious one.
Surprise.
Woody
Yeah.
Allen, is in every single email, it seems. Like Woody Allen is like a backup.
He's like Donald Trump. He
Yeah.
doesn't email himself. So I mean, he could be like, "Oh, I don't write emails. I wasn't any of the," like his wife was emailing Epstein a lot,
Okay.
but Woody Allen does not email. Trump does not email, which is not helpful in this case. But he's always there. Everybody who's emailing Epstein, like Bannon and Michael Wolff, is like, "Hey, we're going to dinner. Is Woody Allen coming?" Like
I know,
he's
exactly.
always
He's
there.
everyone's dinner guest. I mean, I don't know why you'd want Woody Allen there. I'm sure he's interesting, but not like
Very weird.
not with his
I
history.
mean,
But he has a lot to say about Jeffrey Epstein, and I think it would be interesting to hear him under testimony. If I had a dream panel that I could just call people up, I'd say Woody Allen would be a good person. Larry Summers, of course, Elon Musk just recently, Jess Staley.
Yeah.
You've been digging into Jess Staley in the last few days a lot. This is the JP Morgan executive, Jamie Dimon. You sent me something earlier on today about an apparent meeting that was planned with Jamie Dimon and Jess Staley, down to what snacks should be delivered for that meeting. Jamie Dimon claims he never met Jeffrey Epstein. It's got to be a lie. They just worked together on too many things. Michael Cohen we've discussed, Michael Wolff we've discussed, Steve Tisch, a new name to the mix, but came up yesterday. Sarah Ferguson would be interesting. Her charity just shut down. Peter Mandelson has got no diplomatic cover anymore. You should be able to testify. Leslie Wexner, we've mentioned. Melania Trump, obviously, would be interesting to hear. Dasha Drukova, and of course, Ghislaine Maxwell. These are all people around right now that could be testifying in front of a commission that's really seeking the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. These are the kinds of people that could be out there.
The only way they're going to do that is if they get an objective, which I don't know if you can even get this, but like an unbiased commission. It cannot come from the DOJ. The DOJ is too compromised. They're too biased. They're not looking for anything. They're all a bunch of Todd Blanches. Like, I'm going to interview you, but I'm not going to dig, and I'm not going to, and if you start to say something, I'm going to veer. And I'm like, they don't want to find anything. And that's proven by that binder that came out in February, that they're like, sorry, case closed, nothing to see here.
Yeah.
And
just
now
this
we have
weekend, Blanche
3.5
said
million
that there's no further investigations. He's like, I'm done investigating.
Right.
How could you possibly release 3.5 million files with all of us looking at them so carefully and already rule out any investigation? I mean, just the Zorro Ranch thing alone would make an investigation happen, just because two dead bodies allegedly buried there. I mean, if that's true, even remotely true, then you want to look into it. I don't know. It just seems insane. They're closing things so quickly.
They can afford a couple of cadaver dogs to go run across that property and just prove it right or prove it wrong, but they're not going to do that.
Well, they should. I mean, will they do it? I don't know. But this is not your typical DOJ, and this is not your typical government, obviously. So that's not the number 4 story. The number 4 story was meant to be. It was all about. It was going to be all about Musk. Let me see if it's here. Did I?
Yeah, Elon in Paris.
Well, now where is that? I may have misplaced that whole thing. Anyhow, we'll tell you about it anyhow without the banner being
we
there.
Can summarize.
Because the number 4 story is French police raided Elon Musk's ex-offices in Paris this morning as part of a criminal investigation into child sexual abuse images, deepfakes, and Holocaust denial. Now, this is the Paris prosecutor's office, who's also summoned Musk and the former CEO, Linda Yaccarino, to appear for questioning on April the 20th. Some people say this is just, the French having had enough of X and all its political interference. But the raid was conducted by the prosecutor's cybercrime unit with Europol's support, part of an investigation which was opened in January 2025. And the charges being investigated include complicity in possessing and distributing child pornography, sexually explicit deepfakes, denial of crimes against humanity, and algorithmic manipulation by foreign powers. That all sounds pretty true. And it also comes,
Hmm.
amidst Grok's new sexual liberalization,
Yep.
whatever Grok is coming up with. I'm not quite sure. I don't use
Right.
him. Along with all the Holocaust denying that they've done. I mean, AI at X is pretty free and loose in terms of facts, and it certainly
Yeah.
doesn't still follow the rules.
I mean, if it has rules, it breaks its own rules depending on which way you politically lean. I mean, it's a ridiculous platform. It's very sad because it used to be great. It used to be a great place for creators and writers and all sorts of people. But I also wonder too, like, again, he's popped up in the Epstein files quite in a big way this past week, and I wonder if Paris just said, then we're done. We're done with you. If you're in there and we're dealing with all this stuff, then we're done. I don't know that those two things are linked, but I would assume that they are.
I think they're very upset about the political interference. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
what he did in Germany and what he's now beginning to do,
Hmm.
as is Trump, starting to do the same kind of thing where they're like using their power and their money to support right-wing
Yeah.
extremist groups to be elected into office. I mean, it kind of annoys you, of course. Especially if you're a moderate government like
Hmm.
like Macron. He's not interested in that, and I'm not saying this is politically motivated, but you know, it's not beyond imagination that it's politically
Yeah.
motivated. I mean,
I just
before we
can't
get
imagine that any. Oh, go ahead. Go
no,
ahead.
it's fine, it's fine. Keep going.
I was just gonna say I can't imagine that any country really wants to put up with Elon Musk right now, and if they don't have to, they will not.
I know if that news about him becoming the biggest company in the world or whatever it is he's claiming is actually true, it's just like so. Oh, it's so frustrating because no one. I just want Elon Musk and that whole bad trip to go away. It's just annoying. It just feels like a
He is
bad trip for the
annoying.
last few years. Whatever he's on,
Hmm.
just no, I'm not going to say what I'm going to say. Before we get to our number three story, we want to tell you about how we found the last story, which is all about Elon Musk, because we found it on Ground News, which is our partner here at the FiveStack, and why that story, the Paris raids on the Musk's ex offices, was so interesting to us is because what Ground News did is what they do every single day that I find fascinating. They take the same story and they show it to you from different perspectives. So they show you the political bias meter across the spectrum, and they show you how the left is covering it, how the right is covering it, and how the centrist news organizations are covering it. And sometimes it shows you exactly what some people are missing. So with the Paris story, we found out it was 82 sources that covered the story worldwide, but the difference in the way they covered it is really interesting. So The Guardian framed it as Elon Musk's ex rated as criminal investigation into child exploitation deepens. That's similar
Hmm.
to what our take was. But if you read the RT, which is the Kremlin's mouthpiece, their take on the story was Western censorship escalates against free speech platform. So you've got two completely different story headlines there about the same event. Now, obviously, the Russian one is a Kremlin piece of propaganda,
Yeah.
but and there's certainly a lot more subtlety in different stories in the way Ground News does that. But I just love that you get that perspective and you get that reality check and gives you an opportunity to compare the two. I know you've used Ground News. Do you like it? Have you used it much?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think it's like this nouveau wave of how we get our news, that's changing. It embraces the sort of independent journalism lifestyle and pulls people in different modes of thought and different they've reached out to me, they've reached out to some other work that I've done, and just they're very interested in this idea of independent journalism, which is cool. I just think that's very cool that they're furthering that.
I agree with you. I think it's so important that they're backing things like FiveStack, but other journalists on Substack that are
Mhm.
just really important, and that they're partnering with all of us to ensure that we've got everything we need to keep going forward. And it's a kind of accountability journalism that we really need right now. If people want to check it out, they have kindly provided every follower or viewer of FiveStack 40% off if they subscribe right now at Ground News. You have to do it at groundnews.com/FiveStack. That's FiveStack. groundnews.com/FiveStack. You'll get your 40% off for Ground News, and it's really worth your while. You'll get a really different perspective on the news every day. We love
Mhm.
Ground News, and we thank them for partnering with us on the special offer for our viewers. Into the number 3 story, President Trump
Yes.
told Republicans to take over and nationalize voting in at least 15 states this weekend. I'll read that again. President Trump told Republicans to take over and nationalize voting in at least 15
Right.
states this weekend, repeating the debunked 2020 fraud claims. All the same time, I don't know if you've noticed this other story that's also been running where he's threatening to cut federal funding for blue states that resist his agenda.
Mhm.
Now, I guarantee you the 15 states that he has wanting that he wants to nationalize votes are the same 15 states that he wants to take away federal funding from. And
Mhm.
so he's going to use that in the coming weeks as a sort of a ploy to get blue states to hand over their voting polling rolls, voting rolls, and then try to do whatever nationalizing voting means. That's what he wants to do. This is a clear threat to democracy.
I just wonder how he's. I mean, again, anything that he campaigned on is sort of out the window, and people in, his soldiers are going to ignore the fact that he campaigned on states' rights and independent government and small government, and everything he's done ever since has been to like fully federalize under his regime. And I just wonder, I wonder if anybody's asking questions about that. I don't think the MAGA base even is.
I mean, I don't know if they hear all the news. Again, back to
Yeah.
Ground News, I think they get such a different perspective on what we're getting that
Mhm.
the echo chambers are so powerful that I'm not even sure everyone understands what he's doing. I think if Republicans really began to understand how much he's hurting democracy and how we'll never get it back, it would cause shockwaves. Although maybe they are beginning to, because you see the results coming in at every
Mhm.
special election,
Yeah.
and just the general sentiment, as you pointed out earlier, the polling on almost every issue is so
Mhm.
terrible for this man that
Right.
maybe that is actually coming to fruition for a lot of these red voters or MAGA supporters.
I have to say that I came from a red state before I moved to where I live now. And one of my friends is also on Substack, and she posted a picture of a sign that has been by the highway since 2016. And it's a double Trump sign, and it's a huge banner, and it's been there for 10 years. And somebody reworded it to say Trump,
Oh,
Trump for something. And it's so
oh,
well done
Dump
that we
Chump, I
don't
think it
think,
was. Wasn't it Dump
yeah, yeah,
Chump?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I saw you
I
posted
and
that.
it's
I love
I
that.
don't think, yeah, and I don't think it's a tagger because they never took it down, and it's well done. It's something too well done to have been done in the middle of the night. And these are people who are like devoted Trump voters, and they're
Mhm.
starting to take their flags down, they're starting to take their signs down, they're starting to change their minds. And that takes a lot of like humility, I think. I mean, that would be hard to do, to change your whole political agenda after, standing up for someone for so long. And so, I think that's very honorable, but I hope a lot more people do it.
I hope a lot more people do it before time
Mm.
runs out. This is a huge criminal enterprise that is currently doing a lot of terrible things to the United States, and people might think this is just politics is normal. There's nothing
Mhm.
normal about this, and there's nothing normal about Republicans or any Americans supporting an anti-American policy. I mean, what he is doing to voting around America is, or any of these other rights that we have, is decidedly un-American. It's against the Constitution. It's not one of those things you can
Mhm.
be for if you're an American. If you're an American and you support fascism, you're not an American. You're supporting something that is really non-American,
Mhm.
and that's, I think, beginning to sink in. But there is still a sort of acceptance across the board that this is normal and okay. It's just not. It's just there's no normalcy
Mm-mm.
here. These guys are just criminally corrupt and will do anything they can to make a lot of money off America, stealing from the Treasury. I was listening to the House oversight session earlier on today, and I was like really impressed that the questions that the Congress are beginning to ask and the congressmen and women are beginning to ask are all about this. Are all about why is all this money disappearing? Who is authorizing all these military campaigns? Who is authorizing all this money to suppress human rights in Minneapolis or other parts, or shoot people. That's just a real question around why we have these tariffs, these ridiculous tariffs, which are doing nothing but
Mm-hmm.
increasing
And
everyone's
help no
monthly
one. Right.
grocery bills. Like, why do we have them? The only answer is
Right.
that they're enriching themselves. And same thing with
Right.
cryptocurrency. There's that story yesterday out of the Washington Post where you've got the UAE buying half of Donald Trump's
Mm-hmm.
crypto empire, which means that the
Right.
UAE is going to be making a lot of money off crypto because
Right.
he's now liberalized, the crypto policies of America, and at the same time is also giving them all these extra security chips that we've handed
Right.
Abu Dhabi. It just seems crazy. It just seems crazy that
If
people
you
still think,
and it's cyclical too because all these people are in the Epstein files. The UAE and all the leaders are in the Epstein files. The Bitcoin revolution is in the Epstein files. Like all of these things were things that Jeffrey Epstein was dealing with every day, was furthering, was talking about, was meeting with people. Like all these things that we now know Trump does and is earning money from while the rest of us can't pay for our groceries were all things that Jeffrey Epstein was involved with.
yeah.
So if they I continually believe it to be impossible that they were not crossing paths late in life. It's hard
Oh,
for me to
they
believe.
were. The reality of it is that firstly, there's no coincidence that these people back cryptocurrency. These are the same people who backed mortgage-backed securities in 2008 when
Mm-hmm.
the market crashed, and in 1987 when they did the other mortgage-backed securities. These are the same people who did the dot-com boom before they
Yep.
busted. Every single one
Yep.
of those so-called technologies, they're not real technologies. They're just a way of
Mm-hmm.
repackaging fraud and selling it to the American consumer. And this is the same thing we've done with crypto, basically, that they have created a new technology that ultimately, if it succeeds, will completely destroy the US dollar. I don't think it will succeed,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, that's the intention. And it's just another, they just got really smart and they thought they were getting smart. And they said, well, cryptocurrencies could be the next thing and we'll keep, hollowing out the US economy.
Right.
But it's no surprise that they're all connected. And by the way, did you notice in the story that I put out yesterday or the day before, the Viktor Churkin, who's someone in Epstein's world, a former Russian ambassador that shows up in
Mm-hmm.
Epstein's world a lot, he's also really shown up in Trump's empire a lot because he was the first person to recruit Trump for the KGB, or as soft recruiting as an asset for the
Mm-hmm.
KGB in 1987 when he was still the
Right.
second secretary to the ambassador in the UN. But that to me is interesting. Churkin is uh, basically a spy handler. That's who he is. He
Mm-hmm.
handles spies. The fact that Jeffrey Epstein knew him and he also knew Donald Trump, that's weird. That's weird to me.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of the stuff we were being told 5 minutes ago was like conspiratorial, and now it's like, and you know me, like I'm very like grounded. I don't like to venture into like conspiracy as I like to see where the facts are. But a lot of this stuff is just coming up as being factual in these
Yeah,
files, and it's like, oh, okay, so they were involved with like a
yeah.
lot of this like Russian spy stuff. Okay, so the money did, okay, Trump is meeting with Putin. Okay, Epstein is meeting with Putin. Like it's all on paper and in emails and conversations that weren't supposed to be public. So it's now a bigger story than it was.
Absolutely. I love the Dasha Drukova story, but though we're meandering here into other things. But, do you know who she is? Dasha is how she met
No.
Vladimir Putin. So she was Epstein's PR person for the longest time. I'm going to find you the photos because it's not really tellable without these photos. But she worked connected to Peter Thiel,
Hmm.
and she was his so-called PR person in Silicon Valley. They started a venture firm together where they funded a lot of these new startups. And if I can find you the photo, it's just revealing. This is her. Let me just throw it in here and see if I can show it to you. Let me see. Oops, there you go. So this is her. That's Churkin on the left, and that's
Okay.
the deputy minister of something in Russia. I can't remember the exact title, who gave a lot of the models who became Russian models in Epstein models.
Mhm.
He's the one who got them the visas by saying they were exceptionally talented or whatever it is you needed to get that O1 model. And it was all part of the scam to
Hmm.
get these women into America where they could then use that to to spy on people, basically, which is what I think a lot of
Right.
these women did.
Which is why we
Um,
see all these accounts at JP Morgan was for that very reason, was sending money back to
exactly.
these countries.
She is known to all of us because, and I'm trying to find this photo, but maybe I won't succeed. She took she used to run Putin's youth wing because Putin had a youth wing, and at the youth wing, I don't have it. I don't think I'll look in another file. She is known to have given him this kiss, public kiss, which everyone thought was a little bit much. But that's how she met Vladimir Putin way back when. And I think I have it here. Hang on, let me just pull it up because
Okay.
it's a priceless photo that just tells the story better than anyone can otherwise say it. So this is her way back when, as she's meeting as Putin's youth wing chairperson for this organization they had. And that's her and him engaged, and they had this huge kiss at that. Well, kiss, not a romantic kiss, but that's sort of. So she went on to be known as Putin's Kiss. There's a documentary about her, but there's
Oh,
something telling
interesting.
about all of this that she lands up working for Jeffrey Epstein as his PR person years later.
Uh,
Is very very telling. Connected to Peter Thiel, connected to
well, yeah.
venture capital in Silicon Valley. You know,
And if you look through the records, I think it's the U.S. Virgin Islands versus J.P. Morgan, and you see, you go through the accounts. They have the names redacted, obviously, but they don't have the nationalities redacted. They're all Russian, like
yeah.
they're almost all Russian, and then they're like Slovenia, Slovakia, but they're mostly Russian. A lot of girls were coming over from Russia.
Well, this is what the Russians do. You know, they love to run compromise operations on people that they compromise
Hmm.
because they need them compromised. I mean, if you're going to have some sort of crazy operation to defraud America, you're also going to need an operation to make sure those people aren't squealing on you at any point. And that's what a lot of the compromise is all about, and all these women and all these sex parties. It's a
Hmm.
way of sort of making sure that they don't squeal. You know, they don't rat them out. The number two
Yeah.
story in the countdown today is DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announcing that body cameras for all federal immigration officers in Minneapolis are effective immediately. In other words, they will now do what they should have been doing all along and actually wear the proper body cameras that they're expected to do. This comes after ProPublica published the names of the two Border Patrol agents and identities of the Border Patrol agents who killed Alex Preddy, the nurse, who was killed in Minneapolis the other day. Now, I was surprised that the names were not names of white people, and they were not names of white agents. They were Latino agents, and these are them. In both cases, they were Jesus Ochoa and Raymondo
Ochoa.
Gutierrez. I'm not sure if I'm saying those correctly. I'm probably not, but I don't know. That struck me as bizarre. These people are
Hmm.
in America being border control people to send all our illegal immigrants back home, right? That's what they're doing.
Hmm.
And they'll end up killing two Americans in 1 month. Not these two, but the Border Patrol and the
Hmm.
ICE agents. That it's white Americans trying to protect their Hispanic neighbors from being, taken out of their homes. And these are the guys that are doing the killing.
Yeah. I wonder if that's a statement thing too, that I mean, these guys have been working there since almost 10 years each, so they've been there for a long time. But I do feel like there's a lot of reward and division in like I think of my own community, which has a huge Hispanic and Latino community. There's reward for like turning in family and that
Really?
it you think it's very historical, like the idea of turning in your own family. Like I know people who have four generations under one roof and they're still supporting what Trump is doing, and I just want to be like that. I can't justify that. I can't make that
No.
make sense. But I think there is this sense of reward and hierarchy, if you've done it, quote unquote right, um, that they think that they're protected. And I don't, and you see it. They're sending people who are of Hispanic and Latino descent who are U.S. citizens. They're sending them away. They're sending Native Americans
Yeah.
away. They're sending anybody who can't provide paperwork away, and then documenting anybody who stands in the way. So I feel like it's a statement when you see a lot of Hispanic border control officers, like there's a reward system there for working with the US government. I would hope that people have a heart when they do this and recognize where their families are from, because yeah, it's hard to believe what's happening.
No, it really is. It's shocking that this is
Hmm.
happening to America and how it works in the Trump administration's favor. This is basically a way for them to amplify racial tension and to elevate these
Hmm.
people who might not otherwise be considered inside that inner circle of the regime, but they're turning them into loyalists who have this extra power. And it's
Hmm.
in many cases you can argue against why some people might go to extremes in order to get in favor with this administration if they
Hmm.
perceive that that's the only opportunity they have. And if it's a racist regime as well, it's the height of like I don't know what the word is, but it's just awful. It's just awful.
Yeah.
There's no
Well, and
good.
it's funny because you hear about all these like bonus systems that they have set in place, but these people are not get it's like any job. They're not getting the bonuses for 6 months to a year. So they are out there doing this for free.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not being paid $50,000 and then they go walk the streets. They're being promised $50,000 in a certain period of time, and they're going out and they're making these decisions, and I wonder if they ever will be paid that money. I kind of doubt it.
Well, Trump never pays his bills, and everyone should realize
Yeah.
that. So, that's a good reason. This
Yeah.
story out of another Substacker, Pablo Manriquez, is all about how the Pentagon is also quietly building concentration camps outside most of these
Hmm.
cities. A massive Navy contract. The Navy is actually involved in building this $10 billion effort to, build these mass deportation camps, which are right now they might be for immigrants, but down the line, they're going to be for other people. They're just going to be,
Yeah.
dissident camps, really. That's the only thing you can think of that they're going to
Hmm.
do. So it's just, I don't know why people
Well,
are
you've
so in
got,
favor of this
yeah,
immigration policy. I know it's still getting decent
yeah.
responses in the Republican world, but it is the most
Hmm.
inhumane, awful thing. And anytime an American
Right.
or two Americans are killed, and you've got no compassion around that, that you're not even
Hmm.
issuing condolences and something like that, and your approach is to say those Americans are in the wrong place. It just
Hmm.
makes you wonder what the value system of the regime is all about.
Well, I
Um,
wonder if people live in a vacuum a little bit when they live in an area that they don't see a lot of ICE officers and they don't have a lot of immigration, and they don't, their news is very focused and filtered.
right.
I wonder how much they're actually seeing.
How much of that do you think is the problem? That the news is so the echo chambers are so specific and so
Hmm.
different. I mean, sometimes I'm just going back to ground news a little bit here. When I
Yeah.
read what's going on the right compared to what's going on the left, it's completely
Hmm.
different agendas. Sometimes it's like
Right.
we're living in different universes.
Right. And a lot of people still watch Fox News, and Fox News still sees what's going on because they are in cities and they are around the country. So it is, incumbent upon them to report that news, and we know how that goes with Fox News. It usually comes through as being very right wing and very, the president's making the right choices and we're being very patriotic, but even with Fox News you're starting to see little cracks in the things that they're saying, especially when something has just happened. That's the thing. When something has just happened
Mm.
and you don't have time for a lot of opinion and conjecture, and you just see the thing that happened before you start to hear all the news and you start to hear all the things, you get people who suddenly go, oh, I recognize that that's a bad thing because
Yeah.
nobody has told me that that's not a bad thing. I can just see it for what it is without anybody else's opinion lumped on it.
It's very astute and exactly what the regime hopes for. They create these events sometimes. I
Hmm.
believe they create them in order to get that initial burst of positive reaction. And that allows them to get away with a lot of stuff. And one of those things might be what's happening right now in Iran, where it's our number one
Hmm.
story on the countdown today. Iran launched two very aggressive actions against the United States vessels in 6 hours. The very aggressive is not my term, it's their term, the government's term. According to the U.S. Army, the Revolutionary Guard fast boats attempted to board a U.S. flagged commercial ship near the Strait of Hormuz this morning. Hours later, an Iranian drone approached the USS Lincoln aircraft carrier and was shot down by an F 35. The Iranian boats scattered before U.S. Navy destroyer arrived to escort the commercial vessel. No shots were fired, and the U.S. Central Command described the drone's intent as unclear before it was destroyed. But we're beginning to see those first skirmishes of what we expect will be a full-out war in the Middle East soon. And, what a way to distract from the Epstein files. What a way to distract from any shutdown worries you might have. What a way to distract from killing citizens. If you can have a good war, that's what the oldest trick in the book for some
What
of
a
these
way to
dictators.
pause an election, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if we
exactly.
have a nice good war, we don't have to have an election.
That's what
And
he said.
and I and we know that no matter how he gets there, that's the intent over the next like 10 months is to not have an election. And we all have to see how creative he gets to make that happen. But Trump has always wanted to be a wartime president. He wants to be remembered, he wants to be big. And I go back and forth if he wants to be Lincoln or if he wants to be Roosevelt, right? Does he want to
Yeah.
be a global wartime leader or does he want a civil war? I don't know.
Or both, in his case, both.
Or
But
both.
I mean, one of the things he really wants in any war that happens is the minute like we saw this in the first Iraq war, anytime during a war that anyone says something bad about America, you're immediately considered not a patriot. You're considered, someone speaking against the government, and considering all
Right.
the enforcement capabilities that they're going to have around deportation camps and all these other things that they've already got ready. You can see how they'll use a war to say that anyone who speaks out against American soldiers or in any way harms the reputation or questions the decision making of the president is going to be viewed as someone who should be put into a camp. I mean, that's just literally how I think they operate. So,
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me if that's where we land up in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think we're waiting at this point. Like he wants it all to avoid these files. Like he wants a war, so we're not paying attention to the files, but he also just wants a war. He wants it to avoid an election. He wants it, he wants to go play in his new little bunker. He wants to he just doesn't want to leave. And it's a question that I have, going back to all this stuff about him wanting to be, saying that the 2020 election was fake or whatever. And I just want to look at him and say, okay, so what if we hypothetically gave that to you and said, okay, you won the 2020 election. He wouldn't be allowed to be here anymore because this would be his third term and he'd have to go home.
True. Although he wouldn't see it like that. He'd say he needed an extra term just to make up for it.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. That's a very good point you're making. Did you see the story out of the Washington Post just to end off today? There's this gold statue that's waiting for him to choose a location to put up, I guess, at one of his golf courses. The crypto people gave him this gold statue. It's got a weird name, like Donkey, OT or something. I don't know. But this is the president of the United States building a building a ballroom, worrying about a palace renovation at the White House, and building golden statues to himself. It's like
he's got a massive Christian evangelical base, and like that's a pretty, the whole gold statue thing is pretty cut and dry. We're not supposed to do that. I wonder how they'll take that. I'm guessing they'll be fine.
I'm sure they're actually having a little hard time putting this up because they know that the blowback is going to be so ridiculous. But it'll happen. It'll happen. They just, mark my words, they'll find a way to take up a whole news cycle on the fact that they've put, this guy's statue up there in this way. Ellie, that's the full show. We did an entire FiveStack together, and that was fantastic. So thank you for doing this with me. Dean will also thank you tomorrow. Tell me exactly where people can find your incredible work and all the remarkable insight you've been providing everyone regarding the Epstein files and what's coming out of those files.
Sure, it's a little bit of a dumpster fire right now, I think, while we're trying to figure out what to look at first. But I am on Substack at The Panicked Writer. I am on most social media platforms as Red Pencil Script, and I am just, writing, not sleeping, digging, doing what everybody else is doing right now.
What do you think is going to be in these Epstein files at the end? Do you think that it's going to be enough to at least shake the government, at least shake this whole steadfast support for this government back a little bit, or do you think it actually has the power to bring down this government?
I think if we were going to hold people accountable, we already could before we got these files. I don't think that's the intent. I think the massive amount that we have now, you will start to see other people step up and say, you need to hold these people to account. You'll see other countries. I think you'll see maybe like hopefully the Democratic House Oversight Committee might step up a little harder, which they should have done already. But I don't think the Republican Party has any intent on changing their mind. They don't care what's in there. They're going to say that they never saw it. They didn't look. They're going to be Todd Blanche.
Yeah, the stuff that really is intriguing to me is all this stuff about these bodies being buried. I mean, who knows if that's
Mm-hmm.
real yet or not? Although there seems to be a sizable amount of suggestion that it is
Yeah.
real. If that stuff is real, and then that really changes the narrative. I think to beyond any point. Not that any of it was acceptable at any point, but this really
Right.
becomes sort of like a bridge too far for people. I don't see how people are going to accept anything like that. But I think we're a long way off from proving that. That's just
Right. Well, and you also have to think about like a lot of the girls that they brought over were really untraceable. Like if they
mm,
were American girls, we'd have some, information, but they brought over so many girls from Eastern Europe that didn't have to have as much of the identification as we do here. And they didn't have the rules, that we did here. And so if you had somebody brought over from like, let's say Slovakia and they disappeared, we may never know. We may never know they were here in the first place. And
I think that's very true, and I
that's
think
what,
that's
yeah.
the real challenge that everyone has is, these girls may be specifically have been designed to,
Hmm.
no one knew who they were. Virginia Giuffre talks about these women coming over, but not really being able to
Hmm.
communicate with them, so they could have just been used
Yeah.
and then disappeared. And who knows if anyone was looking for them? I mean, we just don't
Right.
know,
And we
and we
hear
don't
about
know.
people like
Sorry,
purchasing kids and sorry,
yeah.
like we hear about Jean-Luc Brunel bringing over kids for someone's birthday and I mean just terrible things.
Yeah, it really is. And it's the height of the worst kind of human trafficking. Imagine being ripped out of your home, ripped out of your country,
Hmm.
taken to some crazy place in Arizona or somewhere, and then, finding out that it's not even just the sex. It's, much more violent, much more graphic, and potentially also
Yeah.
deadly. Horrific stories that are emerging out of the Epstein files. Everyone should follow Ellie Leonard if you haven't yet. She's a must follow on Substack. No one works harder
Thank
than she
you.
does in terms of reading all the Epstein files and
Oh.
documenting. She's got a great group of people that she works with who are helping
Yeah.
identify all these stories. I love the crowdsourcing on this. I think it's
Yeah,
amazing
it's really
that
fun.
everyone's just, and it's really happening. It's not like we're saying it. It's like the people are constantly providing tips to you, to me, or to the
Hmm.
group in general, and it's fantastic. It makes our work a lot easier, but it's also one way to get through 3.5 million folders
Yeah, right?
or files. That is the Five Stack today. Thank you, Ellie Leonard, for jumping in. Dean Blundell will be
Thanks,
back
Seth.
tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I hope. You better be here, Dean. And at 7
Yeah,
o'clock
get some sleep.
tonight, I'm sitting down with Sebastian Younger, which will be an interesting conversation. Sebastian's got a different take on politics than I do, but he's one of the world's
Mhm.
most celebrated war journalists. He's covered war like nobody else. He has interesting insights in what happens to societies that are individually focused and lose their tribes. He talks about the trauma that some soldiers come back with and why they come back with that trauma. Really fascinating. He also talks about being a complete atheist, but then finding God in different ways. And he also has no phone, which is kind of bizarre. No smartphone. He only has a flip phone.
Wow, that's kind of great.
Yeah, so we'll tell you all about Sebastian Younger. He's one of the hot new rising stars on Substack, and we'll be together at 7 o'clock tonight. Have a great night,
All right.
everybody, and thank you for being here on the Five
Bye,
Stack.
guys.
Cheers. Oops.